Okay, moving on to Gothic architecture. So Gothic architecture was the prevalent form of architecture in Europe from 12th to 16th century CE. So this is it lasted for about 4 centuries before the Renaissance period started. And then as the Renaissance started, architecture kind of became a big jumble. Like cathedrals took hundreds of years to complete. And what that means is because there's advancements in styles in architecture, these cathedrals had more than one style in them. So like half of the cathedral is like in one style, and then the other half of the architecture would be in a different style because it took so long to build. Because and also because the architects would change because it took hundreds of years to build, and each architect can work on a cathedral for like maybe 40 years maximum. They had to hire new architects every time that architect passed away, right? And so every architect would have like different things in their mind, and so these Gothic cathedrals, they were very pretty mixed in style. So that's also what makes these cathedrals great, is the fact that they're all very ever so slightly different. Okay, and Gothic architecture, it evolved from Romanesque. Okay, Romanesque architecture. So we're not going to talk about Romanesque architecture in this class because this is a little bit more, it didn't really last that long, but Romanesque came before Gothic, and it literally means Roman-like, Romanesque, okay, Roman-like architecture. And this existed in the Byzantine Empire and most of Europe as well. So the defining elements of Gothic architecture are pointed or ogival arch. It's the same thing, just different terms. And then rib vault, and then flying buttresses, tracery, and stained glass. So we're going to take a look at all of these today. And Gothic architecture is mostly used in religious structures and castles and town halls. So almost everything we're going to see they're going to be cathedrals or castles. Okay, so here are some examples of Gothic architecture. So these are pretty much everywhere in Europe. I saw some in Spain. You can see some in France. You can see them even in England, Great Britain. There's a lot of these in Italy, Germany, everywhere, because after the Western Roman Empire fell, and the Holy Roman Empire was established, all of that whole area was full of Gothic architecture. So the Holy Roman Empire is what later on evolved to Germany, modern day Germany. So here are some examples of Gothic architecture, and you can see these these points. Okay, they're very decorated. Lots of these points that are like very like jagged and decorated. Okay, and columns as well. Columns were borrowed from the Greeks. Okay, so like Ionic, Doric, Corinthian columns. We didn't talk about them yet, but maybe in the future. Okay, and yeah, lots and lots of decorations. It was very ornate. And what are the points of like why even add these like little like jagged edges on these pillars, right? Some of them some of them were to disperse rainwater. Okay, so stuff like gargoyles, you know, gargoyles, right? They are figures of demons or animals, and they kind of like they sit on the edges of the walls, and they stick out quite a bit. And those actually served as diversion for rainwater. So whenever it rained, it would ride the gargoyle and drip down to the ground. All right, some examples, more examples of Gothic architecture. Okay, so a lot of Gothic architecture, a lot of Gothic castles or cathedrals or towers, some of them have clocks in them as well. They're all made of stone. Okay, stone was the building material of choice. They didn't have like steel back then. This was before the time of steel. Everything was stone, masonry, bricks, or marble, limestone. Okay, and they took forever to build. This is the interior, stained glass. You see these arches, you see these vaults, okay, rib vaults, and traceries in the stained glass. Lots of decoration, lots of effort went into it. You also see sculptures inside, within the columns. Okay, so the sculptures usually served as decoration, but occasionally you would see sculptures that also serve structural purposes because they're carved into the column. Okay, and more examples. All right. Stylistically, they're very similar, but if you look closely, there's some details that are different. Like for example, these would have columns that would like stick out like rockets, right? Whereas here you only have triangles and not columns. Okay, so all of this depends on when it was built and who the architect is and where it was located, because these Gothic architectural styles, they also had like regional variation as well. But just for the final exam, or you know, for your enrichment, just know what it looks like in general. You don't have to like point out what area it's from or who the architect is. None of that. Just know that these are Gothic. Okay, so this is an ogival arch. Okay, right here. All right, they're usually located in the door frames, and sometimes windows, and sometimes just pathways. Okay, so an ogival arch is basically just an arch with a pointed tip. So whenever you see an arch with this, it's called an ogival arch. Okay, so know this term. All right, so these are rib vaults. These are ribs, and then this is the vault itself. So the vault refers to this whole area, and then the rib refers to the individual connections between the columns. And they usually intersect like this, and then one goes this way, connecting the columns, and then they intersect again. And then it's a repetition, it forms a pattern. And this not only serves as an aesthetic thing, but it's also very, very strong. It's structural because they didn't have steel to build with. They only had stone, right? So inside these columns, they don't have steel. All this stone has to support its own weight, which means it has to be extremely strong so that it doesn't collapse. So here you can also see an ogival arch right here, because this is an arch and it's pointed up here. So this is an ogival arch, and this whole thing is the vault, and these are ribs. Okay. Flying buttresses. Okay, these are flying buttresses right here. Okay, they're very common in Gothic architecture. It's like when you're standing outside a cathedral, this is one of the main things that you're gonna see. So these are also aesthetic and structural. So these are built because you don't want the walls to, collapse, because they didn't have steel. They had nothing to hold the walls in place, right? So these masonry, all the stone, it stacks on top of each other, and if it's not balanced, it'll collapse, right? So you build these flying buttresses and then connect them to the walls to provide support. Okay, and these were very strong, and some of them they had multiples like stacked on top of each other, 1, 2, and these were all structural. So and they also look really cool, right? Yeah, basically look like this thing's gonna like blast off into space. Tracery. Okay, so these are traceries. Traceries are usually between ogival arches and stained glass. Usually they're on windows. Okay, so this one is a window, this is a window, and this is the tracery on top of the window. This one is not a window, it's just a little nook, and there's a tracery carved into it. This one is a window, and there's tracery above the windows. Okay, so tracery can be in multiple forms, and there can be glass in between, like within the patterns, or it can just be carved into the stone wall, just like a relief. Okay, and stained glass. I'm sure you all have seen this before, or know about it at least. These stained glass windows are very common in Gothic architecture, and they serve mostly an aesthetic purpose. They're supposed to, first of all, like it's like a painting, right? There's an image in it, and when the sun shines through it, it's very fancy. It shines colored light onto the floors and onto people. This is to emulate the radiance of their holy figures or God. It just adds on to the spiritual experience in these cathedrals. Okay, so that's it for this week. So look over the lecture slides and try to memorize the elements of Gothic architecture.